Hello again, everybody. Happy 4th of July, and welcome again. Thanks for joining me for another fireside chat reading history on the other side of the fireplace this time. So I'm wondering if you recognize the books. I think you have to be a little older to recognize these series, which is why I had said last time that maybe baby boomers would be taking a little trip down memory lane. So these are from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. They're children's history series. We've got the Landmark series here, signature books. I have another Landmark series also, and Childhood of Famous Americans. And they were written for an audience roughly 10 years old to 15 years old. I really like these books. I like reading them. I like talking about them and passing them on to to kids and grandkids, and I like promoting them and the content that they contain. The Landmark series has 185 titles in it, 122 American history, and 63 world history. Signature books published by Grosset and Dunlap had 51 titles. They also had a series called We Were There. I've never seen that. And then this one, Bob Merrill, Childhood of Famous Americans, apparently has 170 titles. I had one of these books. I had Mary Todd Lincoln, which I like. I like that book very much. The most information I found was about the Random House, the Landmark series. It was the inspiration of Bennett Cerf, and I always think of Bennett Cerf, What's My Line? From TV. Maybe you remember him from that as well. But he was co-founder and editor at Random House. And his idea was that there should be a history series for children where the history is written as a story in language that kids can understand, but in language that doesn't talk down to the kids. And neither should the language in any way trivial, or the presentation of the material should in no way trivialize or cut corners as regards the historical event or person that's being described. Bennett Cerf did not hire children's writers for these books. He did not hire historians. He just wanted good writers. He gave them a fair amount of leeway. The books were supposed to be about 200 pages in length. They all, you pick them up, they're all exactly the same. They had, that same kind of font. They usually had about 10 of these block illustrations. They were supposed to have an index in the back, which this book about John Paul Jones does. And they were very popular at the time. The way I think about the books, what I find a little bit different about them is just that notice the illustration. It's not a cartoonish. It's not a cartoon. It's not caricature. It's realistic, and there's no sugarcoating. And there's, as I said before, there are no shortcuts. So that's why I think also adults can really enjoy the book, because you get a very somewhat sophisticated account in very readable language about the historical event. Now, why do I like to promote these books? Well, I like to promote these books because I think they give a very positive view of American history, of the founding of our country. I think they give an accurate view. And I think in recent decades, American identity, or American history, has taken a bit of a drubbing. We don't hear about, instead of American exceptionalism, we hear that America is really a bad country, that our founding fathers were not wise men of the Enlightenment, but they were white racist supremacists, that their intent was to perpetuate, to found a country where they could promote all kinds of evils of capitalism and exploit people. And of course, these things really aren't true. And unfortunately, along with this narrative, we get some things that really don't have positive consequences. Multiculturalism, of course, has some redeeming consequences, I must say, some redeeming value. Identity politics, though, is very divisive. And then we have the critical race theory and wokeness, which these don't really present history accurately, and they don't present the broadest picture. And I feel it's really important to give kids an accurate view, and not to and to separate to make a separation between what is an ideological or a very subjective interpretation of history and one which is closer to examining the reality. An example here to show the difference. Now, of course, we don't want on our chats to, well, this ideology versus that ideology and draw a line in the sand, and then we start exchanging unpleasant barbs and start calling names and start to act like people on Twitter and all that kind of stuff. So, but still, I do think it's important to, especially when you're educating children, is to present them with the truth and with accurate information. So I think we can see kind of a then and now with this, and I'd like to just examine the point a little bit longer. Here in this edition of the Landmark series, you can see on the dust cover on the back, it says, "You can't beat the American story." American in capital letters. There's a lot of pride in that comment, and that really reflects the view of the era. This book was published in 1951. It says, "Here it is in the Landmark books, written by famous writers who inject thrilling life into the events out of which our democracy was forged. Outstanding," says the New York Herald Tribune. The New York Times comments, "The level of historical accuracy and the quality of the writing are both high." New York Times, what a difference 68 years can make, because you probably remember that in 2019, the New York Times Magazine took as its initiative, they called it, the 1619 Project. And it's called 1619 because that's the year that they would like us to see as the true founding of our nation. That's the year that the first slaves were brought to the American shores. The project is the creation of one of their staff writers, a black woman named Nicole Hannah-Jones, and the Times Magazine, New York Times Magazine, states the purpose of the project as follows, quote, they wish to, quote, "reframe the country's history by placing the consequences of slavery and the contributions of black Americans at the very center of our national narrative," end quote. Now, it's not quite clear to me why you want to reframe history. You maybe want to do further research, uncover other sources, re-examine an issue, maybe recontextualize given new data. But I'm not sure why you want to reframe it. And also this placing blacks and slavery and black Americans, or what are they called? Yeah, black Americans at the center of the story is simply, replacing another kind of, apparently what they see as supremacy, with all these white people placed at the center of our history. This approach seems very exclusive and distorted, really, and I think it's important to counter it and to show that it doesn't really work. In the founding of our country, very few people were related to the founders, and most of us aren't part of the founding of the country. Italians, Jews, you name it. The founders were a very small group. I heard a program about Abraham Lincoln recently, and he viewed the founders as iron men that connected us all with electric cord through. We were all connected by an electric cord, which was the writings and the principles in the Declaration of Independence, and that was their legacy to us. That was our fathers' legacy, of which we can all be a part. So I think we want to present kids with an honest view of history, an accurate view. This 1619 project, I was going to say, you maybe could call it a social history. Sorry about that interrupt there. Okay, sorry. You could maybe call it a social history. For example, maybe you want to examine America through the institution of slavery, just the way as you might want to examine America through the institution of, I don't know, say the Presbyterian Church, or the, the arrival of a particular immigrant group. But to place this kind of focus and exclusivity on one group, as the 1619 Project does, seems to me to be an inaccuracy that we would want to counter. One of the articles about the Landmark series calls the books, I don't want to quote it exactly, it calls them an icon of American history. I think they're even a little bit more than that, because I think they really represent the pride and the confidence that Americans post-World War II and of those years felt in their, it was part of their national identity, and they wanted to pass that national identity on to children, to spark kids' imagination, to inspire them to be good citizens, to inspire them to respect their history, of course, to acknowledge the wrongs. Honestly, we know it goes without saying, slavery was a grave evil. It's an immoral act perpetrated against, it's a grave evil to the human dignity of any person. And but as part of our entire history, we see it as part of our entire history, and when we make amends for the flaws, as well as praising the good points. So I think that these books represented, as I say, this identity that saw a value in passing the message on to children. So if you have some books, Landmark books, I hope that you keep them. And I found these, I don't have very many in my own collection. I found these, it's fun to look for them in antique stores or thrift shops. These were only $3 to $5 each. And I hope your kids are reading these books, and grandkids, and that we can talk a lot about history for kids. So I really do wish you a happy 4th of July, and I guess everybody's finishing up hamburgers, hot dogs, I don't know, corn on the cob, maybe you have potato salad. And you're gearing up for the fireworks. So thanks so much for joining me, and I really look forward to seeing you next time. So long.